All right, let's go through episode, I believe it's 8 of Wandavision. Welcome back, everybody, wherever you're watching this video, be it on my main channel or Young Group of 5'9" Entertainment. I appreciate, of course, all that support. A lot of people asked me about what was happening in this to try to make sense of what was going on, if it had any historical precedent that was set when it came to the recent episode of WandaVision. I'm gonna try to answer your questions in the best way that I possibly can. So let's just get right into it and let's go through some of the events that actually happened for you guys who canceled your Disney Plus services, which totally understand. Don't blame you for it. And you just want to know what was going on with it. I'll let you know. So we start this episode with the whole Agatha's. It doesn't really go through her origin, but we do see an instance in terms of where she came from. And yes, that does have some precedent coming from the sort of Salem witch trials. They don't go really into too much depth with it because they are setting her up to be this ultimate sort of enemy instead of an ally, which is what she has for the most part been in the Marvel universe in the actual comic book. So the fact that they do acknowledge that, though, I do appreciate that. So you do get at the beginning a scene with her being basically, hey, you're a witch, blah, 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 blah. But they do have an odd take on it. So at least it's there. Give them some credit, I guess, where it's due. So what we do find out is that where they are at, you're seeing that she is a witch, obviously, Agatha Harkness, and she has set a sort of spell that only really allows her powers to seemingly work, and she acknowledges that when she is talking to Wanda, who is tied up using her sort of powers. So we try to figure out what we are. I guess this episode, the whole point is to try to see what angle Agatha has. Why is she interested in what all does she know? How much was she in control? And the question is finally answered that yes, this is still Wanda's doing. This world that we see is still Wanda's doing. That is absolutely her. Where Agatha came along is that she sensed that there was a lot of these magical sort of powers that were taking place. And definitely when you consider the fact that she was able to turn that entire little town, basically put it under her whim, that interests Agatha. And she's like, how did you do it? And that's what the whole entire episode is centered around, her trying to figure out, going through these sort of reruns, or rather through her history, that is Wanda's history, to figure out how it is that we got here and how she was able to accomplish that. Now, that's what it's about. It's about her being as curious, certainly, as she is. We do find out that the kids are not dead or anything. They were kind of stashed away. And that's why Wanda is more so going along with all of this. She can't even use her powers anyway to stop her, Agatha, but she's going along with this because she's like, I want to see my kids. Where certainly are they? Now, as I mentioned before, they are watching these sort of, reruns, and we're seeing them going throughout history. We sort of get some aspects as to why they were doing the whole sitcom thing, and that's because she was growing up certainly watching those. The first one that we see is this sort of flashback in which she's a kid and they're watching the Dick Van Dyke Show until there's this sort of bombing that seems to happen. It seems to eliminate their parents as well, and you also see that on the bomb there's a Stark Industry sort of thing that has there. Now, the interesting part about this scene, or rather the most interesting part, that is that we find out, well, they more than allude to it. They basically say it, that bomb didn't blow up because she prevented it from blowing up, or is that she's malfunctioning, or she made it malfunction. Did it malfunction on its own? She was under the impression that's what happened, Wanda, that is. But maybe it's a case of, okay, she was a little witch back then, and she was able to sort of stop what had taken place back then. And then we move on to further up the timeline, and now we're dealing with her Hydra days. And what we do is find out with her sort of interacting with that Infinity Gem, and wherever they call it within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And of course, it's more of an experience because Hydra's trying to figure out like, okay, well, they admit, quietly, albeit, that everybody that interacted with the stone had basically died. All the subjects did. Now, that didn't happen with Wanda. She interacts with it. They don't understand what's happening. They're trying to watch the video of what happened, and it like kind of just stops with her being on the ground, so they don't see what actually took place. And what we do is we learn from that, as Agatha has explained. I think that was a little too much on the nose, just from a show's perspective, that they have her explaining, okay, this is what happened to the reader, as if they're the audience, as if they're stupid. Which, to be fair, some of them are. So it doesn't. I guess they want you to understand that this was happening, and that's that. The stone, which is what I said needed to happen. It seems that's the direction that they're going in. That way they can introduce mutants into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And that is that the only reason this happened is, or rather what happened was that she interacted with the stone and it amplified her powers. And that's why it didn't kill her. But the powers were already there. See, instead what we initially got was that the stone had given both of them, the twins, if you will, with Pietro as well as Wanda, their powers. And I hated that take always, but now that they got the rights to the whole X-Men, and it was rather the mutants and what have you now, in order to introduce them into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it needs to be an instance in which, okay, that amplified their powers or brought it out of them, not that it granted them the powers. And it seems that that's the direction that they're taking now, and that is a good thing. So we move on. Next time they're in the Avengers, certainly the compound, and that's when she's kind of talking to Vision about losing Pietro and all of that sort of stuff. You start to see that bond forming there, and also she's watching Malcolm in the Middle. So also between all of these different rerun, or I guess segments that they're going through, you see that world, why it was advancing in the way that they were, that Westview, if you will, is because those were all coming from, she was watching Malcolm in the Middle when she was sitting next to Vision. And that's why some of those like shows, whether it be back in the Gap, and as it progressed on to the 90s, that's why it was depicting those particular shows, because that's what she sort of envisioned. We then move on to, I guess, what you can consider a more important part, and that's to the facility. So they go into, a sword facility, and she's talking to Hayward, and she's trying to get Vision's body. Now, what we thought happened, and what it seemed to set up as, and that's what she was convincing the other people of, that she came in there and then took the body and then basically resurrected him, Vision, into, at least that's what I thought, resurrected him and then brought him in. But that doesn't seem to be what happened at all. She does go in there and she finds out that she can't like sense him or anything. He's broken up dead. They're dissecting him, trying to figure out what exactly is going on. And then she just leaves. And then she goes to Westview, into that area in which they were saying, hey, be here or whatever. And then that's when at the end, so more so of that particular deal, she blows up. She has that breakdown. And that's when the actual world of Westview was created. Now, that in itself is akin to, well, I'll explain that here in a little bit. Let me move on and get through the story, and I'll give you guys some of my thoughts. But after all that, we see them out on the street, and you see Agatha has control of the kids, like by their neck. And she's like, okay, now I figured out what happened and what actually is taking place here. They said that you were a myth. You are the Scarlet Witch. And you have control of chaos magic. So that is an odd sort of thing, because now they're presenting it as if she is the Scarlet Witch, which is a mythical thing, and that she had heard of. And now where this is going to go, I have no idea. But that's sort of what they were running with, and that she's a chaos magic. Yes, that is sort of special when it comes to how she produces her powers, and has been in the comic books. And in the end credit scene, we do see Vision, or version of Vision rather, being brought back to life, which is what Hayward and them were trying to figure out how to do. And it seems this whole interaction with Wanda and Westview showed them how it could be done. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, certainly with that. But I want to talk about, let's say, my takeaway from the entire deal. And maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't. But to me, this is a very weird Agatha. I am going to do a video talking about this development of this character and how I guess you could see it as a good thing. I don't want to give it away because I don't want anybody to do a video before I do. But look, dude, this whole young Agatha thing is bizarre for me to see, considering where this character has historically come from. Certainly when you see the timeline. Now, for those of you that don't know who Agatha Harkness is, she wasn't first actually tied to Scarlet Witch. She was tied to the Fantastic Four and being basically a nanny. And as you know, at some point, she basically took Scarlet Witch under her wing to expand upon certainly her powers. And the reason why the timeline is jacked up here, or rather they're just not simply going to use it, is that it's with basically her magic, with Agatha's magic, that she was able to create the twins in the first place. There was an instance actually in the comic books where the twins, where she explains how they were first created, like the first initial time, and how they were created, because you understand Vision isn't a human. So how can he have kids with her? And this is all something that was more so conjured up by way of Scarlet Witch and utilizing her sort of reality warping powers. But she can't really do that. So what she ended up grabbing, which is why I think some people are alluding to the idea that Mephisto is in the building somewhere, because it was part of him that she was grabbing when she was attempting to create these kids. It was part of that soul that she grabbed, or rather a manifestation of Mephisto, sort of hard to explain, and what she utilizes, and those end up becoming, or rather her in combination with the power that Agatha taught her, ends up manifesting itself fully into the twins. So the fact that they kind of skipped over that's not even a thing here, is a little odd, but it is what it is. Also, just for the sake of mentioning it, there was a portion of the Marvel Universe which Agatha actually erased for the sake of the plot, erased the idea of the kids actually being a thing. And again, the only reason she's able to do that, because she is using her magic in order to make those kids actually become a thing. Now, of course, they try to change that when, Young Avengers, at some point they're grown, but we'll get into that. That's some information I actually want to save for some future videos. So what it seems also what happened, and what I noticed as I was watching it, is that the Marvel Cinematic Universe replaced, instead of utilizing the Brotherhood of Mutants, what they did was utilize the Hydra. So for, again, historical reference here for you guys that don't know, they actually started off, Quicksilver and Wanda started off as bad people before they actually joined the Den of Avengers. They were the Brotherhood of Mutants, of course, alongside Magneto and company. They were not good people, and then eventually they ended up, not too far after their creation, they ended up becoming certainly a thing. So, because there's an instance where she was talking to Agatha, or explaining, okay, why they joined Hydra, and that was because they wanted to be part of something, and it's very akin to something as far as what happened with the Brotherhood, the Mutants Brotherhood, and what have you. So it's like they basically slid in, and of course some of that has to do with the rights. They could not use Magneto, they could not use mutants, oddly enough, and now they can. So we'll see if there's going to be some retcon, much like of what we got in the comic books. So yeah, there's that. Now, what we do see, we finally get a glimpse of her parents. I don't know if I can't remember what happened in all the movies. I don't know if they had showed them before, but we do get a glimpse at this part of her parents when they were very young. And it seems like they were setting it more so up in this Cold War-esque type of deal, in which they were ended up being bombed, and that's how they got rid of, which is not anything like the comic book by any means. But I will say that, yes, those parents, the Maximoffs, of course, raised them, but I wonder if we're going to get a high evolutionary sighting, because, man, the amount of retcons with these two characters are are kind of unbelievable. Yes, the Maximoffs, for sure, no matter what version of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver you pay attention to, yes, they created her. That is, they raised them. The retcon happened is we found out that the High Evolutionary was trying to experiment on them. And at some point it was just like, okay, well, they were the adoptive parents more so of them, and the actual real father, that is, was ended up being Magneto, right? So this is why some people thought that the big reveal, they don't know if they're just going to stick with the Quicksilver, or at some point they're going to bring in Magneto or something of that nature. We'll see. But that actually, believe it or not too long ago, actually more recent, got retconned again, in which the High Evolutionary says that, well, because there was an instance, I think this was the Axis timeline, where it was some spell that Wanda did, and she wanted to impact her bloodline and hurt them, and it didn't hurt Magneto. So it's like, oh, well, I guess Magneto's not actually her father here. And then what ends up happening, I believe that's not too long after that, in an Uncanny Avengers comic, we find out that the High Evolutionary, they are actually the real, like, what is it, Django and whatever her mama's name, I can't remember off the top of my head, the Maximoffs, they are their actual parents, and High Evolutionary was trying to experiment on them, and that's how they actually got their powers. That stuff sucks, but that's sort of par for the course for basically anything within the last decade when it comes to Marvel. They have absolutely no idea what it is they're doing. Maybe that sort of retcon had something to do with what happened with the whole rights thing, but who knows? It doesn't make any sort of sense when you pay attention to that. Also, Easter egg. When there was an actual comic where Captain Marvel, which she was Captain Marvel, and I'm not talking about the Captain Marvel I'm talking about, of course, Monica Rambeau, in the early 80s, Wanda is explaining her history, and that's when she is explaining, of course, this is not too long after the Marvel Universe explained it, a few years after the fact, that, of course, they were the parents, or excuse me, they were the daughters of Magneto, both Quicksilver and Wanda. So we find out, or rather in a couple of years after that, there's this comic book in which she's explaining that to them, specifically to Monica Rambeau, which is interesting because obviously Monica at the time was part of the Avengers. Let me see make sure there's anything else that I didn't mention. I'm trying to think of off the top of my head. I know there's something else that I wanted to discuss. But long story short, this is picking up. A lot of people are going to love what's going on with WandaVision. I'm seeing these depictions of some of these characters and some of these changes, the positive things that can come from this. Mainly, it seems that they're not going to go with the fact that the stone granted her powers is more so that it amplified it, which is awesome because that gives them freedom to kind of pull in some of these mutants, but I don't know what direction they're going to go with in terms of if that's going to be considered, if the High Evolutionary, because that's a whole nother arc they can go through if they bring him in, and what role that he had and Magneto maybe had, the parents, who's the parents, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. I'm not really sure what direction that they're going to go in and in the future, but it does seem that Agatha is more so just curious in her being a witch, her being curious as far as to what's happened with how she's able to do all of this in terms of what she's doing. Yes, it does give you those House of M vibes when you see her just kind of explode and change everything around her. That's like straight out of House of M. So how much influence they're going to draw from that? Is it going to be a case where she ends up flipping the whole entire universe on its head? I have no idea. I guess we're going to have to find out. Monica I don't think was in this episode at all. So yeah, now you know what Agatha is all about, or rather what is the reason all of this sort of took place and the direction that they're going in. I don't know if Agatha is going to end up becoming a good person that actually trains her. We will see, but if she is just a villain and then they just erase her, yeah, that is stupid. But to be honest, I expect that from Marvel. All right, I hope you enjoyed the video. I will be covering the next episode once it drops. Please follow me on all forms of social media. And until next time, y'all be easy. Peace.